Welcome to Erik Learns the Hard Way, episode 5. Today we're going to talk about that nasty 4-letter word, discipline. Okay, well, it should be a 4-letter word. But seriously, how do you get things done when you work for yourself? Let's get going. Wow, wouldn't it be amazing if your boss gave you every day off of work? Didn't really have any goals, didn't have any objectives. You just got to go to work and do nothing. Welcome to freelancing. You're the boss. And sooner or later you realize, actually, I'm not getting anything done. And maybe sooner than later you realize I'm not getting paid because I'm not getting anything done. Well, how do you get things done when you work for yourself? When you don't have a boss cracking the whip all the time or demanding that you get things done on a certain deadline? If you're your own boss, or you want to be, let's talk about how to get things done. First thing I do when I need more wisdom is turn to books. And I've got 3 incredible book recommendations for you. They all are along the same topic, and that is the topic of habits, because I believe that discipline, although that's a big word, longer than 4 letters, is really broken down into much smaller parts, all of which are habits. First is Charles Duhigg's book, The Power of Habit. It's a little bit mechanical in places, but really, really interesting. It talks about how your brain works and kind of why it works that way. On the other end of the spectrum is Jon Acuff's book, Finish. It is much more lighthearted, more anecdotal, and he gets right to the point. Finish. How do you finish stuff? Big projects, small projects, and it's very practical and very funny. If you get it, I would recommend that you listen to at least one podcast of his or YouTube or something like that so you hear his voice when you read it. That makes it even better. My favorite book when it comes to habits is James Clear's Atomic Habits. Absolutely incredible. Breaks it down into so many different, very usable parts. I won't go through the whole book, but let me tell you, this comes with my highest recommendation when it comes to managing yourself and conquering habits. Well, I'm not going to read those books to you. You can do that on your own. What I will do is I will share my top 5 tips as to how to get things done. Tip number 1 is have a dedicated space to getting the work done you want to get done. Now, obviously, that's a little harder if you want to be a macaron baker and you've got to use the family kitchen. It's going to be harder. But for other things, set aside a specific place for your work, even if that's just one little chair and a small desk. And when you sit down at that desk, that space means work. When you put your butt in that chair, that says it's time to work in this place. As much as you can, have it avoid distractions. I personally couldn't work if I was looking out a window. There's just no way I could get anything done. I'd be like the dog in that movie Up. Squirrel! That's one of the things about having a space that says this is work, which leads me to tip number 2. Have a specific time that you work. I know you want to quit your job so that you don't have to show up at a particular time and you can leave whenever you want to, right? Well, if you've tried that tactic at home or on your own, you realize that's really hard to get things done. My recommendation is really actually have hours. Tell yourself, I'm going to show up at the office at this time, even if your office is a corner in the bedroom. Say, I'm going to show up at this time in this place, and I'm going to work from here to here and get things done. I think it'll do amazing things for your productivity. Along with doing the work in a certain amount of time, give yourself breaks. Be realistic. You're not going to sit down and stay in your chair from 8 a.m. until noon and then come right back at 12:30 and sit there and just slave away until 5:30. You're not going to be productive if you do that. So make sure you schedule breaks in there for yourself. Tip 3, have goals. I've heard it said that if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. And while that may be fine if you're wandering on a vacation of some sort, it's not such a good business plan. You really have to know where you want to be. Where do you want to be in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years? But let's scale it back a little bit and Where do you want to be at the end of the day today? Where do you want to be at the end of the week? Where do you want to be at the end of the month? And you can't do that unless you take some time and sit down and write out your goals. This is where I want to be, and this is what I want to have done. And I will say that writing your goals out is incredibly important. One of the things that I do is journal. Here's a couple of my journals. There are different journals for different things, and I track different things in there. But the act of writing something down makes it more real, more memorable. And I do not understand the magic behind it, but it makes it more likely that you will get it done. And whatever that thing is for you, where you write those goals down, whether it's an app or a whiteboard or a sheet of paper, doesn't matter, but find what works for you and stick with it and do it. One little thing that I heard on a podcast, I wish I remember who said it, is very insightful, very true, and I think worth thinking about as you consider your goals. And that person said, we tend to overestimate what we can do in one day, but vastly underestimate what we could accomplish in 1 year. Tip number 4, have boundaries. Probably one of the biggest problems where we struggle with boundaries is with our time. And our time tends to go into the internet. Whether it's Facebook arguments or just scrolling through Instagram endlessly or the black hole that is porn. It's a waste of time. It does damage to us. And in the end, we are not productive as a result. So you've got to set limits on what you have to be aware that is a time suck. And you have to say, okay, here's what I'm going to do about that. Put some boundaries on it. One of the temptations when we talk about time and getting things done is the temptation to multitask. It's not a thing. You are not more productive when you multitask. You might think you are, but the stats are in, the facts are in, you're not. If you want to read more about that, there's an incredible book called Deep Work by Cal Newport, and he takes it down. He says that if you really want to get things done, you've got to focus on one thing. So that's another thing when it comes to time, is don't multitask. The exception being, this is my favorite anyways, is if I'm working out, exercising, or driving, I like podcasts because I can drive and listen to a podcast at the same time. And I can exercise and listen to things at the same time. And I've learned a ton doing it. When it comes time to talk about time and productivity, we often want to think about like, I'm just going to work. I mean, the goal was to not work all the time, but if you've been freelanced successfully for more than a few months, you know that the temptation is to work all the time. And I would recommend don't do that. You're actually not as effective when you do that. I think it's important to have dedicated time off where you don't work. Because psychologically, if you know that this time is time off, I do not work here, it helps you to get your head into a zone, well, I do work here. This is my time on, this is my time off. And I would recommend that you honor time in that way and give yourself a break. Tip 5, reward yourself. And this might seem like a funny thing talking about productivity because we were talking about getting things done, right? I mean, if we got things done all in the first 4 steps, as if it were that easy, why would we have to have a step 5 and reward ourselves? I'm telling you, read those books I recommended and you'll understand that the psychology of getting things done is a circle. And until we're rewarded for getting things done, we don't want to do it again. Think about it. When they train dolphins or dogs or sea lions or people, whatever it is, once we perform what we're supposed to perform and we get a reward, we're like, awesome, I'll do that again. You need to do that for yourself. So find a reward that's appropriate, something that you can afford, something that's scalable, and reward yourself when you get done. Sounds silly, but trust me, it works. I've got a few more tips for you. These are from a friend of mine, Scott Endermar. I'll put a link down below to his site. Here are some of his tips for productivity. He likes the idea of working in a co-working space at least once in a while. He finds that really helps him get things done. He said, realize that you and your work change over time. If you've got even great habits and they're working for you this year, you might need to modify those habits next year, i.e. don't get stuck in a rut. We've been talking about focus and staying focused, But part of that focus is getting yourself off task every once in a while. And Scott recommends taking a nap, taking a walk, maybe doing some meditation, something that when you're done with it, short, but something that when you're done with it, it brings your mind back fresh to your work and you can focus and get done. Last tip is simply this: start. Start. There's that proverb, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. It's true. You have to take the first step, whatever that is. And to that end, there's a quote by a personal trainer. His name is Jordan Sayat. And I think he really nails it. It's hard truth, but here it is. You don't start with motivation. Motivation follows action. We often think of it the other way around, but he says you don't start with motivation, you start with action. So I would encourage you, go out there and start. Do the YouTube thing, the thumbs, the sharing, all the things. Most of all, I hope this is useful to you. And if as a result of this, you can get something done, I would love to hear about it. Thanks.